Masechet Shevuot, Daf Chaf. We begin the third perek, new Mishnah. Shevuot shetayim shehen arba. Shevuah she'ochal v'shelo ochal she'achalti v'shelo achalti. Actually, this is an old Mishnah. We saw it already all the way back in the first perek, but we went on a tangent to explain other things that have the same formula, things that are two, that are four, and we explained all of those. That took the first two chapters, and so now finally we get back to the actual subject of this Masechet, which is about Shevuot. So the Mishnah teaches that there are two types, major types of Shevuot, but if you go to the subtypes, it's actually four. And what are they? If someone makes a vow that I will eat or that I will not eat, those are both about the future, positive and negative. And then that's the main two. And then we flip them around to the past, that I did eat yesterday, or that I did not eat yesterday. If someone makes a vow, well, if it's a future one, then it depends on his behavior in the future if he follows through. If it's about something in the past, then it depends on what he had done in the past to see whether it's a valid, true vow, or if he violated and made a false vow. Shevuah shelo ochal ve'achal kol shehu chayav. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. Now, if someone makes a vow that I will not eat tomorrow, and then tomorrow he eats just a little bit, a tiny bit, less than a kezayit, he is liable. If he did it on purpose, he's liable lashes. And if he did it by mistake, he is liable to a korban, oleh ve'yored. So he is liable according to Rabbi Akiva. However, Amaru lo Rabbi Akiva, Hechad masinu be'ochel kol shehu shu chayav shezeh chayav. His colleagues asked him, Rabbi Akiva, where do we ever see that if someone eats just a tiny bit, that he will be liable, that you'd say this person is liable also? In all the other prohibitions in the Torah, someone eats not kosher, if someone eats on Yom Kippur when he's not allowed to eat anything, one is not liable unless he eats a minimum size, usually a kezayit. That's called eating. And so that the prohibition should be only if you ate a kezayit. Otherwise, it's not called an act of eating, and you should not be liable. Amar lehem Rabbi Akiva, v'chi echan masinu b'mdaber umebi korban shezeh medaber umebi korban. But Rabbi Akiva responds, where do we ever see that someone can speak and just by violating words, he brings a korban? Usually, you only bring a korban hatat for an action. There's a prohibition, a lo ta'aseh, and you violate the lo ta'aseh by doing an action, right? A ma'aseh. But just for words, usually you don't bring a korban. But in this case, a vow, violating the vow, you do bring a korban. What does that show? What does that have to do with anything? Well, that shows this is a special law. And in what way is it special? The point is that when one violates a vow, happens to be in this case, the vow is about eating. If I vow that I will not eat tomorrow, and then he eats. But really, it's not a law of eating, it's a law of violating the vow. He might make a vow about anything. I make a vow that I will not drive tomorrow. I will not walk tomorrow. Whatever he says, it could be about anything. Therefore, since the violation is not an eating violation, but rather a violation of the words that he said, of the vow. And so we can make a vow about anything. I vow that I won't even move my left hand a little bit. And so because it's not a eating prohibition like eating not kosher, that's about, you can't do an act of eating. But here it's about not about an eating violation, but about a vow. So even eating a little bit would make one violate the vow, according to Rabbi Akiva. The Gemara asks, "Lememra de she'ochal de achil namashma urminhi shevuah lo ochal lecha shevuah she'ochal lecha lo shevuah she'lo ochal lecha asur." It seems from here that if you say she'ochal, that I will eat, then that means that you're promising that you will eat tomorrow, and you have to eat on that next day when you promise. Okay, that is a simple reading of it, sure. However, we have a contradictory Mishnah in Masechet Nedarim, that if someone makes a vow that I will not eat of yours, No, I don't want to eat anything from you. We're in a fight. Or he says the language that seems the opposite, as he says, I make a vow that I will eat of yours. That is also prohibited. So that's interesting. And the question is coming from this second phrase, even though he's saying, I make a vow that I will eat of yours. What he means is, I make a vow if I will eat of yours. Or I'm making a vow, he means that I will not eat. I'm making a vow regarding eating of yours. And so we see here that she'ochal lecha is a language of actually not eating, because just by saying I'm making a vow and talking about eating, I make a vow regarding eating of yours. So then he's not allowed, even though it sounds like he's making a vow to eat. I make a vow that I will eat. I make a vow from eating of yours. It's hard to translate into English. Okay, it means something like that. But anyway, the point is she'ochal lecha is a negative, that I will not. And finally, the last case in that Mishnah is, if he says a double negative, no vow regarding that which I do not eat of yours. Meaning, anything that I do not eat of yours, I'm not making a vow on. That implies that which is yours, I do make a vow about. In all these three cases, it is prohibited. So that's the question. When he says she'ochal, in our Mishnah in Shevuot, she'ochal means I have to eat. Well, over here in Nedarim, she'ochal means I cannot eat. Which one is it? Amar Abaye le'olam de'achil namashma. This is really the simple, plain meaning. If I just say it out of context, a vow that I will eat, it means that I have to eat. La kashya. Kan b'misarbin bo le'echol, kan b'she'en misarbin bo le'echol. However, you have to also look at the context. If there's no context, no one is forcing him to eat, he's just like, for whatever reason, he says, I make a vow that I will eat, then he has to eat. That's the second one. So the first one, kan b'misarbin bo le'echol. The second Mishnah, the Mishnah Nedarim, is where someone is pressuring him to eat. He's at someone's house, he's a guest, and they're saying, eat, eat, and he doesn't want to eat. So then he says, a vow that I will eat. So what he means is, it's clear from the context that he's not going to eat. That's the Mishnah Nedarim. The Mishnah here in Masechet Shevuot is when there's no one telling him to eat. Just out of context, if he says without context, I'm going to eat, then that means a vow that he's going to eat. Matnitin b'she'en misabin bo le'echol, and we explain further. Our Mishnah in Shevuot is where nobody is forcing him to eat. The Baraita, or really it's the Mishnah in Nedarim, b'misabin bo le'echol v'ka'amar la'achilna v'la'achilna techi hava mishtaba hachi ka'amar shevua shelo ochal. It's where he's somewhere, often at a guest at someone's house, and he's there, and everybody's saying, the host is saying, eat, and you're not in the mood to eat, you're full, you don't like the food, whatever, so you say, I'm not eating. They say, eat, so I'm not eating. They keep pressuring you, and then the only way to get out of it, to make them stop, is to make a vow, and he makes a vow of a vow that I will eat. A vow that I will eat. When he's saying it in that context, it means obviously a vow that I will not eat. That's what he means, even though he doesn't say the word shelo. So it really depends on context to know what he means. But in fact, plain, the words mean, yes, I will eat. Rav Ashi Amar. Rav Ashi has a different answer. Teneh shevuah she'i ochal lecha. Rav Ashi says, add a word into the Mishnah. In the second case, it's not shevuah she'ochal, but shevuah she'i ochal lecha. And the word i is in fact a negative, that I will not eat from you. So we ask, if that's what the Mishnah said, then what is it teaching us? Isn't that obvious that if you say she'i ochal, that's the same as saying shelo ochal? So why are you saying another case? And the answer is Mahadotema lishaneh de'it kila le kamashmatlan, because I might have thought that it sounds like it's such a slip of the tongue. One might have said when someone says shevuah she'i ochal lecha, why is he not saying the more usual formula shelo ochal lecha? It sounds like a stutter. He's saying shevuah she'i ochal lecha. So you might think that he could come back later and say, oh, I meant to say a vow that I will eat. Shevuah she'ochal lecha. I just had an extra aleph in there. I was just like stuttering. Shevuah she'ochal lech. Then we say, but that's not so. That's what the Mishnah is coming to teach, that if you added an extra particle there, even though it's a very short word, and you said, Shevuah she'i ochal lecha, then that e means its own word, and it means not, and therefore you cannot eat. But if you don't say anything at all, which is our Mishnah, here in Masechet Shevuot, when it says Shevuah she'ochal lecha, clearly wwithout any extra E, then it definitely means in all contexts that he's making a vow that he will eat. Tenor banan, mibta shevuah, isad shevuah. A Baraita teaches that there are other words that one can use to make a vow, and one of them is the word mifta. The other one is the word isad. We see both of these words here in Bemidbad chapter 30, which is all about the laws of a woman who makes a vow, and if she's in her father's house, the father can undo it. If she's married, the husband, when he hears about it, has limited time to undo it. And it says here, literally it means the pronouncement of her mouth. So miftah is a language of prohibition of a vow, and that this pasuk here, v'shama aviyat in Sara asher asera al nafsha echlish aviyah v'kam kol v'chol isar asher asera al nafsha yakum. So the word isar is also another language that means a vow. The word isar, same as the word asur, comes from to bind, like matir asurim. Hashem, we say every morning, Hashem, you release those who are bound up. When we're sleeping, we can't move, and then we're released and we can move. So that's literally the word isar or asur means someone who is bound up. It could also mean bet hasohar, someone who is jailed. But in the context of law, it means something that is prohibited. And in the context of vow, one's taking a vow and prohibiting oneself, tying oneself up so that they cannot do a certain act. Okay, so now the Baraita teaches that the word miftah, if you say miftah, that I will eat, whatever, that's the same as saying a shevuah. And if you say the word isad, that's also the same thing as saying a shevuah. Then the Baraita goes on and says something cryptic. We're going to see two explanations of it. Isur isad, the prohibition of isad. Im ata omer isad shevuah chayav. If you say that the word isad is the same as a shevuah, then if you say isad, that I will do something, and you don't do it, you're going to be liable. V'im lav patur. And if you say isad, the word isad is not a shevuah, then you will not be liable. We interrupt this Baraita to wonder what are they talking about? What do you mean? Why are you asking if you say that the word isad means a shevuah? You just said on the first line, isad is a shevuah. So why are you saying if it is when you just said it is? Amar Abaye, hachi kamar, mipta shevuah, isad mitpis b'shevuah, isur isad, imata omer mitpis b'shevuah, kimosi shevuah mipiv dameh, chayav, ve'im lav patur. Abaye says this is what it means. The word, this is how you should understand the Baraita. If someone says the word miftah, that's the same as saying shevuah. If someone says isad, then that's not a shevuah itself, but rather it's bonding to, it's connecting to a shevuah. It's a connecting word. It's saying this thing will be prohibited to me like something else. This thing, it will be like something else. So then, I'm not making a prohibition directly on A. I'm just saying A will be to me like B is. And let's say B is something that's already prohibited. So that's what Isar does, and it doesn't create a new prohibition. It can only make an associative prohibition. Now, what's the law regarding associative prohibitions? When you say A will be like B, so the prohibition of Isad depends. If you say in general that someone who is matpis, who says that this is like that, makes an association, is like saying a shevuah itself, then one would be liable. But if not, then you'd not be liable, because this is a discussion in general. If I say this is prohibited to me, okay, yes, then it's prohibited. But if you say this A is like B, is that valid? Is that like making a vow? Well, then Isad will be like making a vow, and one would be liable. But if in general making an association is not liable, then Isad also would not be liable. That's what Abaye is saying. Isad has the same law as matpis, whatever that is. Okay, good. Now the Gemara asks, how do you know that the word miftah means an oath? Because it says, now a different context from Vayikra, chapter 5, it says if a person tishaba makes a vow lebate bisfatayim, so you see it puts it back to back, a vow to utter with lips. So obviously a vow and an utterance, the bitui, is the same thing. Isar name dichtiv kol neder v'chol shevuat isar, but that doesn't work because the word isar is also put back to back with shevuah. Any oath or vow, isad. Shevuot, a vow of an isad. So this is also back to back. So that would mean isad also should be the same as a shevuah, but you just said it's not. Rather, we're going to use a different pasuk. How do you know that the word isad is an association with a shevuah? Because the pasuk says if someone binds her soul by a bond with an oath. You see, it says with an oath, bishbuah, and it says the word isad. Isad is something that prohibits something to a person. Bishvuah, when you compare it to, associate it with something that is already prohibited by a shevuah. So that's how we know that isad is a language of matpis. But that proof doesn't work either because mivta nameh. Haketib lechol asher yibateh adam bishvuah. It also says regarding the word bitui or mivta, it says yibateh bishvuah with a bet. So then if you're going to say that the word bet, the bet here means that isad means association, then mivta here also means bishvuah, association with a shevuah. So we could find pisukim that say isad and bivta this way, and isad and bivta that way. So there's no proof from any of the pisukim that we brought so far. Ela marabayeh bivta shevuah mehacha im hayot tiyeh leish undareh aleha or mivta sefateha asher asera al nafsha. We quote the pasuk that we looked at earlier from about 37. If someone is married to a husband while her vows are upon her, or the clear utterance of her lips, which she has bound, with which she has bound her soul. In this pasuk, it does say the word mivta, but it doesn't say the word shevuah, and yet it says she bound herself. She is prohibited, asera. So how did she prohibit herself? She didn't say. It doesn't say the word shevuah. Rather, it only says mivta. So since it says here mivta alone without shevuah, that proves that mivta is a standalone word and is equivalent to a shevuah. Whereas we don't have a pasuk that says just isad by itself. Isad is always connected to shevuah. Therefore, isad is only an association with the shevuah, whereas mivta means a shevuah by itself. Rava Amar le'olam emalach mitpis b'shvoah lav kemosi shvoah mipiv dameh. Rava says, I have a different interpretation of that baraita, and I think that someone who makes an association with a shvoah, that this thing will be like that thing that's prohibited by a shvoah, that's nothing. It's not like he made a shvoah. It's not prohibited, and therefore, what does this baraita mean? V'chikamar mibta shvoah isar name shvoah. It means like it says. If someone uses the word mivta, that means a shevuah. If someone says isad, that this thing will be isad to me, then that's also the language of shevuah. Both of them are languages of shevuah. Because if isad were an association, then it wouldn't be prohibited. The difference between them, however, is that mivta always means a shevuah, whereas esareh, the pasuk put the word isad between the word neder and between the word shevuah, as we're about to see. Therefore, it depends. If the person uses the word isad, but he says it in the language of a neder, it'll be a neder. What's the difference between a neder and a shevuah? A neder is a prohibition on the thing itself. You say, hare zo olah. This thing, this animal will be an olah. So, therefore, the prohibition is on, or this food is prohibited to me. So the prohibition is on the thing, on a chefsa. So if the same thing, if it says isad zeh, this will be an isad to me, then the thing is prohibited. That's like a neder. But if you use the language of a shevuah, I will not eat this thing. He says, isad, I will not eat this thing. Then that's the language of a shevuah. So then it will apply as a shevuah. Hechan nitilo v'im bet isha nadara or asera isar al nafsha bishvuah. We see it in this pasuk that says, if she vowed in her husband's house, that says neder, not nadara, and then it says o asera isad. It puts the word isad after the word neder, and then it follows up with or isad al nafsha bishwa with the shevuah. So you see that isad is after neder, but before Shevuah, it's right in between, and therefore it can go both ways. V'azdu l'ta'amayhu. Abaye and Rava are both consistent with their opinions elsewhere. Itamar. Matpis b'Shevuah Abaye amar ki mosi Shevuah mepiv dameh. Rava amar lav ki mosi Shevuah mepiv dameh. Someone makes an associative vow. This will be like that. Abaye says it's the same as making a vow about A. Rava says it's not like the making a vow like A. If you want to make something prohibited, you have to say it about itself. You can't just say A will be like something else. Metibeh. We're going to have a challenge against Rava. Metibeh. Eze isad ha'amur b'Torah. What is an isad that's mentioned in the Torah? Ha'omer harei alai shelo ochal basar shelo ashteh yain kiyom shemet bo aviv. Someone says, I will not eat meat or drink wine on whatever this day, like the day upon which his father died. So there is a custom. Some people do it today, Ashkenazim, that on the yard site they fast. So if someone had a father who died and he made a vow not to have meat or wine on the day his father died, and then he says, I take upon myself that I will not eat meat or drink a wine tomorrow, like the day my father died. So that's a Shevuah, even though he didn't say the word Shevuah. So that's an association. Or Kiyom Shemet Bo Piloni, or like the day someone else died, and he generally fasts on that day. Kiyom Shenadag Bo Gedalia Ben Achikam. Som Gedalia. This is going to be prohibited to me, like Som Gedalia. Kiyom Sheda Yerushalayim B'Chorbana, or like the day that one saw Yerushalayim destroyed, and one fasts on that day. Asur. So if someone says that language, then it is prohibited because he is making an association, right? So we're assuming now that all these are associative. And it says isad. Isad is something that's an association, and the association is prohibited. So this sounds just like Abaye, that if someone makes an association, and that's what an isad is, that it works. It's like making a Shevuah. By the way, this is only true that will be asur if in fact it is prohibited that day that he's referencing. So if in fact he has a vow, a standing vow, that he won't eat meat or drink wine on the day his father died, every yortzeit, and then he says, oh, you know what, tomorrow meat and wine is going to be prohibited to me like on my father's yortzeit, then it's prohibited. But if his father's alive, or he never made a vow regarding his father, then there's nothing for it to hang on to. The association is not with something that's prohibited, so then it's not prohibited. Bishlam halabaye mid matpis beneder neder matpis b'Shevuah Shevuah. So this makes sense according to Abaye, since someone who makes an association with a neder is the same as a neder, and here you see Shemuel use the word v'hushen nadur, that he had made a neder in the past on his father's yortzeit. So he's associating something with a neder that is an association. So therefore it makes sense also that if someone makes a Shevuah, says something and associates it with a Shevuah, also it will be a valid association. And so this Baraita supports Abaye. However, Ela l'Rava kashya. But Rava said if someone makes an association, it does not create a prohibition. So how can Rava explain this Baraita? Amar lach Rava, Teres v'amachi ezu isad neder ha'amur b'Torah. Rava says, you have to explain the Baraita as follows. And what it's asking is, what is the prohibition of a neder that's mentioned in the Torah? It's not talking about the word isad. The word isad here is not isad as in a key term, meaning a prohibited vow, but rather it means what's the prohibition of a neder. So you have to rewrite the words a little. It's not ezu isad amur b'Torah. It says eze isad neder. What is the prohibition of a neder that's mentioned in the Torah? And then it says, and so on. A neder that's mentioned in the Torah is someone who says, I will not eat meat or drink wine like the day that his father was died, or like the day someone died. And Shemuel says that's only if he made a neder regarding that day on the yortzeit, then he can associate it with then he could say that this thing is also the same. So this is isur neder. This is not an isar. This is just saying that thing is prohibited, and it's the same as that. So it's not an isar, and it's not an association. It's actually a direct prohibition, and therefore Rava rewrites and re-understands this baraita. Maitama amar kera ish ki hidor neder ladonai ad shehidor bedavar hanadur. And what is the reason for Shemuel that you have to say that that the thing that you're associating with is also prohibited? Because the pasuk says ish ki hidor neder. You use double language. You make a vow, and it's regarding something that is already a vow. So that means you have to make a vow regarding something that is already a vow. Then it creates a prohibition of a neder. But Rava can say, listen, this is not just an association, because in fact he is saying that he is saying, I am not going to eat meat. And he's also associating with a neder. So that's why this is prohibited, and that is what a neder is. When you say this is prohibited and connect it with something else that's a neder, so that's the neder mentioned in the Torah, because the Torah says, Yidor neder. We next analyze the Baraita further. The Baraita said, Keyom shemet bo aviv peshita. If someone says, I'm not going to eat meat or drink wine tomorrow, like the day of my father's yortzeit. So isn't that obvious that then that he would be prohibited from eating meat and drinking wine when he says that formula? Why does the Baraita have to give such an example? And the answer is, Keyom shenadag bo Gedalia ben Achikam isterich le. Really, this example of like the day of his father's yortzeit is obvious, but it brought it so that it can bring further examples. And the next one, one of the examples is like the day on which Gedalia ben Achikam was born, meaning Som Gedalia. And we need to say that example because I might have thought that that wouldn't work. Sakadatecha mina kevan dechi lo nadar name asur ki nadar name lahavya ale isur v'haylav mitpis beneder hu ka mashma lan. I might have thought that regarding the Som Gedalia, the person did not make his own personal neder that I'm not going to eat on Som Gedalia. Rather, this is a takana of the Chachamim that say that this is a national fast day. So I might have thought that just like since a person does not make a personal neder regarding Som Gedalia, so too if someone makes a neder and says, I'm not going to eat tomorrow meat and wine like Som Gedalia, that would not create a neder, and this would not be called associating a prohibition with a neder, because there never was a neder to begin with. And therefore the Baraita wants to teach this example in particular to say that actually this neder does work. If someone says, I'm not going to eat meat and wine tomorrow, like Som Gedalia, in fact, that does create a neder. Even though he didn't make an original neder, he's associating it with a prohibition. And that's fine, that's enough. This is going to be prohibited to me by a neder, just like on Som Gedalia, food is prohibited to me midrabanan, because of the rabbinic legislation, and that is sufficient to create a neder. V'af Rabbi Yochanan sabar la leha derava techi ata ravin amar Rabbi Yochanan nipta lo ochal lecha isar lo ochal lecha shevuah. Rabbi Yochanan says the same thing as Rava. Rabbi Yochanan lived before Rava, but he's in Eretz Yisrael, and so when Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he reported in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that the word mivta, if someone says mivta, I will not eat from yours, or isar, I will not eat from your food, both of those are a language of Shevuah. That is consistent with Rava, who also says that the word isar creates a Shevuah. It's a standalone word. Unlike Abaye, who said that the word isar creates a copy, an association with a Shevuah. And then that would depend on whether you think that such an association creates a prohibition, but Rava disagrees with that, and he says isar is a standalone word. Rabbi Yochanan thinks that as well. Ki ata Rav Dimi amar Rabbi Yochanan. Another report from Eretz Yisrael, that one was from Rabin, this is from Rav Dimi, another one of the Nehuta'eh. those who traveled to Bavel. Ochal velo ochal sheker. V'azhartem me'acha lo tishabe'u b'shmi lashaker. Achalti velo achalti shav. V'azhartem me'acha lo tisa et shem Adonai Elohecha lashav. Rabbi Yochanan made a distinction between Shevuot sheker and Shevuot shav. If someone says something about the future, I will eat or I will not eat, and then he violates it, that is called sheker, Shevuot sheker. And the prohibition regarding Shevuot sheker, it comes from the pasuk in Vayikra, do not swear in my name, l'sheker, falsely. You said you're going to do something and then you didn't do it, or you said you're not going to do something and then you did it. That's sheker. Whereas if someone makes a vow in the past, I ate yesterday, I did not eat yesterday, and it's wrong, in fact he did the opposite, then that's called a vain oath, shav. And the prohibition regarding that is from the Ten Commandments. Do not take God's name in vain. It's not so much a sheker that he lied, that he said he's going to do something and then he didn't do it, but rather it's vain. He said something false about the past. Kunamot over belo yachel devaro. If someone makes a kunam is a nickname for korban. Some people would say, this thing is prohibited to me like korban. But that became like a holy word. So just like you don't want to say Hashem's name, you don't want to say korban because it creates such a strict oath. And so people would replace korban with kunam. Now, if someone makes a kunam and says, this thing is forbidden to me like a korban, and he violates it, then the prohibition that he violates is the pasuk lo yachel devaro. He should not break his word, or yachel can come from chol. He said something is this is something prohibited to me like something holy, like a korban is holy, kadosh, and so you should not make your word secular, opposite of sacred, by violating that oath. Okay, that's the statement from Rabbi Yochanan. Now we question the statement. Me'tibe, shav sheker echad hen. Rabbi Yochanan said that sheker is about the past. Sheker is about the future. Shav is about the past. But then we have a braita that says shav and sheker are the same thing. This seems to contradict Rabbi Yochanan. Ma'ala mideshav l'shavar, av sheker nami l'shavar. Since Rabbi Yochanan says shav is about lying about the past, so then sheker should also be about the past. Alma achalti v'lo achalti shekerhu. So I ate or I didn't eat yesterday, and it turns out to be wrong. Then that's called sheker. It's also called shav. Shav and sheker are both about the past, and that would contradict Rabbi Yochanan, who says that sheker is about the future. How could we answer that? Are you really comparing them? No. Sheker and Shav are in fact talking about two different things. Rabbi Yochanan is correct. Shav is about the past, Sheker is about the future. So what does this braita mean when it said they are one? Umay davar echad hen? בדיבור אחד נאמרו כדתניא, זכור ושמור בדיבור אחד נאמרו, מה שאין יכול הפה לדבר, ומה שאין האוזן יכול לשמוע. It means that they were both of these commandments, both of these pisukim that we had here. One of them is from the Ten Commandments, the other one is from Vayikra. It's actually from Vayikra 19, Parashat Kedoshim Tihiyu, which itself is a summary or expansion of the Ten Commandments, right? Almost goes even in order over there. And so, just like regarding Zachor and Shamor, that comes from the two different versions of the Ten Commandments, one in Shemot and one in Devarim. And so you say, well, Shemot is telling us what the Aseret HaDibrot are. In Devarim, Moshe is repeating to the second generation, here's the Ten Commandments that Hashem gave us. So you'd expect it to be exactly the same. And then there's a few differences between the two sets of Ten Commandments. So how could there be differences? So the famous Baraita says, in fact, the original law-giving, Hashem said both the word Zachor and the word Shamor in one utterance. This is something that a human being would not be able to say with his mouth. We don't know. We can't say two things at once. And normally, a human ear cannot hear that. You can't hear two people talking to you at the same time, saying two different things. You can't understand, but you have to concentrate on one or the other. But miraculously, at Ma'amad Har Sinai, The voice was able to communicate two things, and the people were able to understand it. So that the Seta Dibrot, this is not the only difference, but this would include other differences as well between them. This was a complex message that had multiple levels, and both are true. And when it comes to us in the Torah can only say one thing at a time. So Shemot gives one aspect of it, Devarim tells us the other aspect of it, but we're supposed to mesh them together in order to get the full meaning of the Ten Commandments. So, just like we say Zachor v'Shamor was said at once, so too these two Pesukim regarding Shav and Sheker are actually all part of one commandment. They were originally commanded as one, and then to make it possible that we can understand it, so then the Torah gives two different Pesukim, and as Rabbi Yochanan says, these are two different aspects of false oaths, but really they're both part of one utterance, one commandment. So the idea here is that whenever you have a seeming contradiction or repetition in the Torah, don't think that these are not reconcilable. They're both part of one utterance, and then we have to it's separated so that we can understand each aspect. But really, we have to appreciate that they were really came from one same source and reconcile them. Bishlama hatam bedibur echad neemru kederav ada barahava damarav ada barahava nashim chayvot bekidush hayom devar Torah demar kera zachor v'shamor kol sheyeshno b'shmira yeshno b'zechira v'hanin asher ho'il v'itnehu b'shmira itnehu nami b'zechira el hacha l'may hilchetami ba'ileh. And now we want to understand the practical effect of saying that two statements were said in one utterance. We understand regarding Zachor and Shamor that they were said in one utterance. Like, what's the difference? Why do we need to know that they were said in one utterance? Well, Rav Ada bar Ahava taught us something very important there. And he says, we know that women are obligated to say Kiddush on Friday night. To say or hear Kiddush on Friday night, and it's a deoraita law. Now, normally, women are exempt from mitzvot aseh shezaman gerama, and this would be mitzvot aseh to recite Kiddush. That's an aseh, and you have to do it every Shabbat on Friday night. So that's zeman gerama. So normally, a woman would be exempt. However, here they are obligated. Why? Because the Torah says Zachor and Shamor. Shamor is referring to the lo ta'aseh. Be careful. Remember to observe and not violate Shabbat. Now, women are obligated in all the law says. A woman cannot do melacha on Shabbat. Says don't do melacha. Women are obligated. And so once we know that, we compare Zachor and Shamor, and we say anyone who is obligated regarding Shemirah in the law ta'aseh also is obligated in Zechira. Zachor is a positive commandment. Remember it. Observe is be careful not to violate it, and Zechira is remember it. Remember it how? By saying Kiddush. So, women, since they are obligated in Shemirah, in the law Taseh, they're also obligated in the Mitzvat Aseh. That's the practical halachic implication of saying Zachor and Shamor were said in one utterance to compare them, to put them together. Good, so we understand that. But regarding Sheker and Shav, what's the point of the Baraita to say that they're both in one utterance? What difference does it make? Well, what if there were two utterances? Okay, so we still know there's two laws, one about the past, one about the future. What does it help us to know to compare them and say they were part of one utterance? Ela keshem shelokel shav kach lokel nameh al sheker. And the answer is just like one gets lashes if one violates shav about the past, so too one gets lashes if one violates a vow about the future. So that's what we're learning from by comparing them by saying they're in one utterance. We question that. It should actually be the other way around, right? Well, which way you're facing? You can turn the arrow in the opposite direction. Say the opposite. Just like one gets lashes regarding sheker, regarding the future, that one is more obvious because if someone says, I'm not going to eat tomorrow, and then they go and eat, so that's something that yesh bo ma'aseh. You made a prohibition against yourself, and then you did an action to violate it. Clearly there one would get lashes. But the chidush is that just like you get lashes about the future, so too you get lashes about the past. Even though about the past there's no action, you just said words. You said words that were false. You said, yesterday I didn't eat. But it's not true. You ate all day yesterday. And so one might think that since there's no action there, It's only false words that you wouldn't get lashes, and that's why when it comes to say sheket and shav are one, is to teach us that there are lashes and about the past. We ask pishita, hai lav, hai lav. Wait a second, that's also obvious. Both of them are a lav, and generally a lav, one gets lashes. So you could learn them independently. We can figure out that each one gets lashes independently. Ma'odatema kedamar le Rav Papa la Abaye lo yanakeh kelal. Okay, so you know why we need to compare them? Because we might have thought what Rav Papa told Abaye. This is going to come up in the next stuff. Rav Papa asks Abaye. It says regarding in the Ten Commandments, when it says don't take God's name in vain, lashav, says because Hashem will not absolve the guilt of he that takes his name in vain. So I might have thought that Hashem will not absolve him at all, even if he gets punished, even if he gets lashes, still, he deserves lashes, but Hashem will not forgive it anyway. I might have thought that that's true. Kamash malan kedeshani leh. So the comparison between sheket and shav comes to teach us that, in fact, if one gets lashes for a Shevuot shav, then that Hashem does absolve him. We're going to see Abaye's answer to this on the next daf. And the point is that this baraita is coming to teach us that this is true by comparing the shav to the sheket. So just like regarding sheket, when you get lashes, you're absolved. So too shav, when you get lashes, you are absolved. And even though it says that Hashem will not absolve, that means he will not absolve if there's no punishment. But if you get a punishment, then Hashem will absolve it. Another answer. The comparison is not about lashes, but rather about the obligation to bring a korban if someone did this unwittingly, they said a false vow. So just like one brings a korban regarding sheket in the future, if I said I'm going to eat, and then I don't eat, but I by mistake, I didn't realize, I forgot about it, then I bring a korban. So too, about the past, I also bring a korban. And this would only be true if the Braita follows the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, because Rabbi Akiva said that one brings a korban for the future, just like for the past, just like one does for the future. If someone says, I ate yesterday, he thought he was saying the truth when he said a vow that he ate yesterday. Turns out, actually, yesterday he didn't eat. But he didn't lie on purpose. It was a mistake. So Rabbi Akiva says he has to bring a korban oleh v'yored for the past also. Not so Rabbi Ishmael. He disagrees and says that korban oleh v'yored is only for a sheker in the future and not for shav in the past. And so if we say that this Braita is Rabbi Akiva, then that's what it means when it says they are one. What do you mean they are one? That we're comparing them to say that one brings a korban for both. Me'tibeh, ezohi Shevuot shav, nishma l'shanot ateyadua le'adam. Shevuot sheket nishma la'chalif. Challenge to Rabbi Yochanan from a Braita. The Braita says, what is a Shevuot shav? Someone who makes a vow to change what is known to everyone. He says something that's just false. Everybody knows the sky is blue. He says the sky is green. Okay, so that's a Shevuot shav. And what is Shevuot sheker? Nishba lehachalif. He makes a vow that contradicts something. Sounds like it contradicts the past. According to this, Shevuot shav is about the past. So this is a challenge to Rabbi Yochanan, who said Shevuot sheker is about the future. And the answer is Ema nishba umachalif. Change the language of the Braita, just change one letter. It's not that he makes a vow to contradict the past, but rather he makes a vow about the future, umachalif, and he contradicts it by acting in the opposite way of what he made a vow for. So as long as we change that one word, we have to be machalif, the language of the word machalif, and switch out the lamed for avav, and then it will be in accordance with Rabbi Yochanan that the Shevuot sheker is something about the future. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen.